every project, every pilot is eating up resources. And so if something feels stuck, if you don't immediately know what to do next, kill it.
Welcome to Decision Loop, the podcast from Relic Solutions, where we speak with the experts driving transformation across retail, manufacturing, and consumer goods. From AI pilots at scale to data readiness, governance, and the human side of automation, this show is your signal through the noise. AI pilots are everywhere, and yet most never make it past proof of concept. On this episode of Decision Loop, we explore why well-funded innovation efforts so often stall and what it really takes to turn pilots into lasting business impact. Our guest today is Robyn Bolton, founder of MileZero, a consultancy helping companies drive consistent growth through innovation. She is also a professor at Massachusetts College of Art and Design and brings serious pedigree to the table with stints at BCG, Insight, Procter Gamble, and holds an MBA from Harvard Business School. She is also the author of Unlocking Innovation. Now, let's get into it. Welcome to the Decision Loop podcast, Robyn. And I think the first question I want to ask, if you could delegate something in your everyday life to AI, what would that be?
It's a great question because I've been experimenting with delegating, and I'd say what I feel safest, most comfortable delegating to AI is research. I've kind of experimented with delegating email, calendar management. Absolutely not. I guess I'm too much of a control freak for that. But doing research is actually been something that has gone well, has saved me a ton of time. And, AI does a great job at it, far better than I could in the time that I have.
Yeah. And I find that in my role as well, that I'm able to do more research than I would otherwise have done and research things that I normally wouldn't have the time to do. And so, yeah, I completely agree with that. First of all, I'm going to start with a stat. And that's a stat that's come from Relx, really. So it's according to Relx's State of Supply Chain Report 2026. 71% of organizations plan to invest in Gen AI over the next 3 to 5 years. So my first question is really, what's driving this explosion of AI pilots across enterprise right now?
Right. So I think Gen AI and AI in general is the latest shiny object. And I don't say that dismissively. I mean, it is a shiny object. It is what everyone's talking about. It is what, market analysts are studying. Public companies, publicly traded companies are getting asked about on earnings call. I mean, it is just taken over the conversation. And so you have to have a point of view on AI. You have to be showing investment. It's just going to become one of those business mandates, really, at this time. And I think I know your own stat, there's a lot of investment happening and a lot of investment planned. The big question is, what's the ROI going to be?
Yeah. And I completely I completely get what you're saying there. If anyone was to go to the National Retail Federation show in January this year, all you could see was agents everywhere. And it must be so confusing for anyone listening to this podcast right now who's a leader within retail planning or supply chain. I'm going to hit you with a new stat, and that's from the McKinsey. So that is that 90% of Gen AI projects are stuck in experimentation. So why do you think so many AI pilots fail to deliver value at scale?
Because those AI pilots, I think they were activity over achievement. And what I mean by that is because there's such a shiny object effect with AI, people have just rushed in to do something. It's kind of the sense of AI, we're doing AI. and boards and C-suites being like, what are we doing in AI? And just this rush to AI and the usual diligence that companies have, in retail and across other industries of saying, wait a minute, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What are the results, the outcomes we need to make this worthwhile? That deliberate diligence, thoughtfulness kind of got set by the wayside in the urge, the motion, the momentum towards AI. We have to do AI. And so I think that's why, 90% of projects or pilots aren't producing results, aren't going to scale, is because it was about the activity versus the results that folks need to see.
Okay, so that actually leads me to you talk about innovation as a system, and I really wanted to actually dig into what you meant by that.
Yeah. Yeah. So innovation, which is something new that creates value. So AI definitely falls into that category, or has the potential to fall into that category. Innovation is essentially a learning activity. Operations, execution, what companies do day in and day out, that is a scale and execution activity. And they are entirely different worlds. And the reason for that is, when you are doing what you've always done, when you're operating your company, you have far more knowledge than assumptions. You've been there, you've done that, you've seen things repeatedly, cause and effect. Even if something is new, you have the experiences that you can kind of predict what's going to happen. And so there's a lot of confidence. As a leader, you're expected to have the answers, or at least, 80% of the answers. Innovation is the opposite. You've never done it before. And there's a good chance that no one has ever done it before. That's definitely the world we're in with AI. Everyone's learning, everyone's figuring it out. We don't know what cause and effect are. We don't know what happens next. We don't know how competitors are going to respond. And so if you approach those conversations, those decisions in the same way you approach executional ones with, I have the answers, you're going to be wrong more than right. And so you need to have more of a learning mindset. You need to have more of an exploratory, how can we learn? How can we take little steps? And more of kind of a lean in approach, not a micromanaging approach, but more leaning in, getting involved. That is a process. That's not something that can happen between 10 and 11 on a Tuesday morning. That's something that's ongoing. And so that's why I say it's innovation is not an event. You can't schedule it. It's a journey. And it's a system because everything in an organization is a system that touches on multiple things.
So if you have to have a different mindset, does that mean that leadership has to sort of adapt their own behavior as well? So what type of behaviors should, they adopt in order to sort of, I suppose, support innovation?
Yeah, I actually think this is the greatest challenge that innovation faces. I often say that innovation is not an idea problem, it's a leadership problem because leaders do have to, in many ways, do the opposite of all of their instincts. Leaders have gotten to senior levels because they are great operators, because they have incredible experience, they have incredible instincts. They can anticipate things because they've experienced them. And because none of that's true in innovation, all all of your instincts could very well be wrong. And so, the different leadership behaviors that people need to demonstrate is almost saying kind of, hey, how do I act in a traditional meeting when we're talking about the operations? And then doing the literal exact opposite. So instead of coming with answers, I'm coming with questions. When people look to me for answers or ask me a question, I ask them a question back versus giving them an answer. Instead of kind of leaning back and being the authority, I have to lean forward, get into the work. Again, not in a micromanaging sense, but as a way of learning. Instead of expecting detailed data and financials and hard facts, I have to work off of assumptions and have patience. So it's a huge, huge challenge for leaders to be able to do that switching several times a day often.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite interesting when you start to talking about financials. And it's really, how do you judge whether a pilot is working? Because, leadership, they're going to be under so much pressure. This shiny new object of AI, oh, you've got to get AI, you've got to do that. And agents now, and Gen AI, and all of these different sort of like terminology that's bounding around. So, normally, your mind, when you go straight when you talk about value from AI, it goes straight to financial. But are there, measures of success from pilots that we're not really thinking about, like adoption, or is there something else?
Yeah, ultimately, a pilot does need to show financial returns. I mean, that's businesses are for-profit organizations. The language of business is money, so pilots need to deliver financials. How you approach that, though, is slightly different in the sense that, big companies are used to doing big things at scale, and pilots are small things. If you go in and you ask for $1,000,000, people are gonna expect more than that back. They're gonna expect 3,000,000 back, 3 when you're learning, you don't know if there will be any ROI, let alone if there is, when that's coming forward. So don't make a $1,000,000 ask. It's really about kind of laying out what is the learning plan and asking for just enough money to make the next step. So it's small asks to make small steps. The other thing, kind of flashing forward to, all right, well, if we think this is going to cost, making this up, $1,000,000 and we need to see a 5x ROI, so we need 5 million in revenue from this. One of the things I talk about is kind of the need to believe financials, is working backwards to say, all right, well, if we need 5 million in revenue, what are all the ways that revenue could be driven? What do we need to believe about each of those things? And then kind of taking a look at those assumptions and saying, are they believable? That's a first good check, because the assumptions are not always believable. Once you figure out kind of what your end financial goal is, what are the things you need to believe? Are they believable? And then how can we test each one to build our confidence that it's actually going to happen?
Okay, I've got a question around the principle fail fast, learn fast. So I've been through a bunch of pivots during my career because I've worked in quite a few scale ups, and you have to deal with a lot of change. And so really my question is around, how do you know if you're not quitting too early? And I think a lot of people leaders I talk to through my job is that they don't actually know what to innovate, where to start, particularly with, as we get into Gen AI and agentic AI, it's like, what process do I need to innovate using AI? So have you got any advice for them about where to start, basically?
So always start with a problem. And I would say either start with your most painful problem or a problem that you think you can solve reasonably quickly. And the reason I would focus on one of those two is, quick wins are fantastic proof points within the organization. They can buy you time, they buy you support, they can buy you more resources. And so showing a quick win, solving a problem relatively quickly is huge and can be a real game changer for what comes next. The reason to pick the most painful problem is because everybody is invested in it. Everybody hates that that problem has occurred. Everybody feels the pain, and so everybody wants it resolved. And so there will be much more kind of organizational support for investing in solving that problem. Now, that problem may take longer to solve because there's probably a really good reason it's still there. It hasn't been solved. It's complicated. It has lots of, kind of tentacles that touch other things. So it will require more patience, but because most people are impacted by it, that's what's causing the pain. There will be more investment in saying, okay, let's figure this out.
So you've got a successful pilot. How are you going to scale it? Is my next question. So, can you think of some examples where, some practical advice, but also some actual examples that you've seen where you've seen some organization that has successfully scaled something, and how they've managed to do that.
Yeah, it's very rare, quite honestly. Um, and the key is essentially approaching it like a relay race. So, very simplistically, if you have an innovation team, they're working on, developing the new thing. They're piloting the AI. And then you have whoever they're going to hand it off to that's going to scale it. And the reason you want to have, kind of two different groups loosely is because of the differences in the activities that we talked about, the learning versus the execution mindset. But the last thing you want to do is like have one team chuck it over the wall to the team that's going to scale it, because there are just so many things that don't get communicated that you wouldn't even think to communicate. And so instead, what needs to happen is that kind of relay, that baton handoff, where both teams are running together for a period of time. An example of a company that did this really well was actually, and I was blessed to be part of it, was Procter Gamble, and how they approach innovation. In that, when I was working on what would eventually be the launch of Swiffer, R&D worked for years on developing the product. And then, the new business development team, the innovation team that I was a part of, we worked side by side with R&D once it was ready to come out of the lab and into a commercial pilot. And then when it was time, the decision was made to launch and to scale Swiffer, then there was an innovation team that I was a part of. And we worked alongside the brand team that was going to take and scale it. And some members of the innovation team actually moved over to that scaling team and became part of it. And all of that is because there's just so much implicit knowledge, again, that like you would just never think to communicate until the moment pops up. And so having that relay race, and in fact, some people moving from one team to the next team is so, so critical to moving from pilot to scale.
I think really, are there anything that you can see, any patterns or pitfalls in a handoff? What is there anything that usually breaks in a handoff, or something to avoid?
The biggest two things that break, one is that even in the earliest days when a brand launches, or a product launches, it's gonna be smaller than everything else in that leader's portfolio because it's brand new. As you mentioned before, as a leader, you have a portfolio and you have to make really important resource allocation decisions. And, hey, if I spend a dollar or a pound or a euro on this $2 billion product, I'm going to get a much bigger ROI, much bigger impact on my business than spending on a $20 million product. The relative difference in size tends to suck resources to the bigger things and kind of starve that new idea. The other big kind of failure mechanism is if the new idea, and AI could potentially be very much at risk of this, is a totally different business model than other things in the portfolio. So if it's a different revenue model, a different cost model, a different profit model, requires different resources. If there's anything fundamentally different in the business model, it is going to freak people out. It's going to complicate the work. And again, it's kind of honestly get starved of resources and kind of slowly die.
Do you think that AI pilots and AI innovation projects are a different beast from a typical innovation sort of initiative, just because of the speed of change that we're going through at the moment?
Definitely the speed of change and also the relative simplicity of starting something. I mean, you can spin up an agent, a chatbot in a couple of hours. Whereas, if you're thinking about new products or, new services, creating anything, in the traditional sense new would take months, years potentially. So it's much easier to start an AI pilot and experiment, which again is I think why so many are starting and so few are succeeding, because the barriers to trying are so low. There's still so much to learn and understand about AI. creating an agent, creating a chatbot, creating an app. I recently saw a stat. It was something like 60, maybe 80% of AI products that are out there are actually just wrappers around ChatGPT or Claude. They're wrappers against one of the big LLMs. And so as a result, they don't have a competitive advantage. They don't have a moat. So it's easy to copy them. That again allows us to start something really quickly, but sustaining and scaling it is much, much harder because we're reliant on an underlying infrastructure.
I just want to wrap up with a few final questions. The first one would be, before approving another pilot, what's the one question that every leader should ask?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit. Be like, what is the problem this is solving? And how will we know this is successful? So kind of two questions, but I linked them in an and.
Okay. And then I'm just thinking about our audience in supply chain and retail planning and where they want to be in 5 years. So actually got another quote, and it's from a lady called Rita McGrath. And she says, "It's a dirty little secret. For all the talk of innovate or die, all the boot camps, all the money spent on training, and all the books, articles, and punditry, most companies still don't have a well oiled system for managing their innovation process." So, my question is, over the next 5 years, what capabilities need to be in place to successfully move beyond AI pilots?
The most important things to do, I'll focus on kind of what the first things to do um, are. So, one, before you start an AI pilot, make sure that it's linked to a strategy or priority of the company. So if it's not strategically important, if it's not going to help with something that's a priority, you're not going to get the resources, you're not going to get the support and the patience that you need to go through the learning process that's required. So, one, make sure there's a strategic or priority link. Two, get really clear about the problem you're solving and who has that problem, and make sure that it is, as we say, you're creating a painkiller and not a vitamin. Anyone who has ever broken an arm or had surgery or something like that, they know that they are much more diligent about taking their painkillers than probably their daily vitamins. So make sure you're working on a painkiller, not a vitamin, and define success upfront and give it a reasonable timeline.
Okay, wise words. My final question is, and really thinking about the listeners here, if a leader feels stuck in the pilot plateau, what's the one piece of advice that you'd give them?
Start killing things. Every project, every pilot is eating up resources. And so if something feels stuck, if you don't immediately know what to do next, kill it. That's because so many companies have what's called zombie projects. The living, the undead, and they come and eat your brain and your resources and your time and your energy. So if you feel stuck, kill the project, end it, and then start again with the diligence and the thought and the deliberateness that you bring to non-AI pilots.
Okay, thank you, Robyn, for absolutely brilliant interview today. I really enjoyed it. And thank you for joining this podcast.
Thank you, and great questions.
So, 3 key takeaways from today are that 1, you've got to start with the problem, and 2, you've got to define the success criteria as well as the stopping criteria up front. And finally, you need to be in learning mode. As a leader, you need to do the opposite of what your usual instincts tell you. Share in the comments below what you found most interesting in today's conversation with Robyn. You've been listening to Decision Loop, a podcast by Relic Solutions. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube, and share it with someone navigating the next era of intelligent planning. And for more insights on enterprise transformation, be sure to visit relicsolutions.com. And remember, in a world powered by AI, better decisions make the difference.